Hey everybody, welcome back to There's a Boy in the Girl's Bathroom. We are on to Chapter 3 today. Bradley opened the front door to his house, then made a face. It smelled like fish. "You're home early," his mother said from the kitchen. She was a large woman with fat arms. She was wearing a sleeveless green dress and holding a butcher knife. "My friends and me, we raced home," he told her. A fat fish, about the size of one of Mrs. Chalker's arms, lay on a board on the counter. Bradley watched her raise the knife above the fish and then quickly hack off its head. He walked down the hall to his room and closed the door. "Hi everybody," he announced. "Bradley's home." But he was pretending that it was someone else who was speaking. "Hi Bradley." "Hi Bradley," he said. "Hi everybody," he answered. This time he was speaking for himself. He was talking to his collection of little animals. He had about 20 of them. There was a brass lion that he had found one day in a garbage can on the way to school. There was an ivory donkey that his parents had brought back from their trip to Mexico. There were 2 owls that were once used as salt and pepper shakers, a glass unicorn with a broken horn, a family of cocker spaniels attached around an ashtray, a raccoon, a fox, an elephant, a kangaroo, and some that were so chipped and broken that you couldn't even tell what they were. They were all his friends. And they all liked Bradley. "Where's Ronnie?" Bradley asked. "And Bartholomew." "I don't know," said the fox. "They're always going off together," said the kangaroo. Bradley leaned across the bed and reached under his pillow. He pulled out Ronnie the rabbit and Bartholomew the bear. He knew they were under his pillow because that's where he had put them before he went to school. "What are you two doing back there?" he demanded. Ronnie giggled. She was a little red rabbit with tiny blue eyes glued on her face. One ear was broken. "Nothing, Bradley," she said. "I was just taking a walk." I had to go to the bathroom," said Bartholomew. He was a brown and white ceramic bear that stood on his hind legs. His mouth was open, revealing beautifully made teeth and a red tongue. "They were making out," announced the Mexican donkey. "I saw them kissing." Ronnie giggled. "Oh, Ronnie," scolded Bradley, "what am I going to do with you?" She giggled again. Bradley reached into his pocket and took out a handful of cut-up bits of paper. His language test. "Look, everybody," he said. "I brought you some food." He dropped the bits of paper onto the bed, then scooped all his animals up into it. "Not so fast," he said. "There's plenty for everybody." "Thank you, Bradley," said Ronnie. "It's delicious." "Yeah, it's real good," said Bartholomew. "Don't play with your food," said Mother Cocker Spaniel to her 3 children. "Pass the salt," said the pepper owl. "Pass the pepper," said the salt owl. "Let's hear it for Bradley," called the lion. They all cheered. "Yay, Bradley!" Ronnie finished eating and then hopped off by herself, singing doo-dee-doo-dee-doo-dee-doo. Then she said, "I think I'll go swimming in the pond." The pond was purple stain on Bradley's bedspread where he had once spilled grape juice. Ronnie jumped into the water. Suddenly she cried, "Help! I have a cramp!" "You shouldn't have gone swimming right after eating," Bradley reminded her. "Help! I'm drowning!" Bartholomew looked up. "That sounds like Ronnie," he said. "It sounds like she's drowning in the pond." He hurried to the pond to rescue her. "Hold on, Ronnie," he shouted. The door to Bradley's room swung open and his sister, Claudia, barged in. She was 4 years older than Bradley. "Get out of here," he snapped at her. "I'll punch your face in." "What are you doing?" she teased. "Talking to your little animal friends?" She laughed, showing her braces. It was Claudia who had broken Ronnie's ear. She had stepped on it accidentally. She told Bradley it was his fault for leaving his animals strewn all over the floor. He didn't tell her that Ronnie wasn't on the floor, but she was lost in the desert. Instead, he had said, "Who cares? It's just a stupid red rabbit." "Mom wants you," said Claudia. "She told me to get you." "What does she want?" "She wants to talk to you. Tell your animals you'll be right back." "I wasn't talking to them," Bradley insisted. "What were you doing then?" "I was arranging them. I was putting them in alphabetical order. It's a project for school. Call my teacher if you don't believe me." Claudia snickered. Although she always made fun of Bradley's animals, she had felt really bad when she stepped on the rabbit. She knew it was Bradley's favorite. She had bought him the bear to make up for it. "What do I want a stupid bear for?" he said when she gave it to him. Bradley went to the kitchen. The fish, now cut up and covered in onions, was frying on top of the stove. "You want me?" he asked. "How's everything at school?" asked his mother. "Great. In fact, today I was elected class president." "Your grades are all right?" "Yes, Mrs. Ebel handed back a language test today, and I got another A. In fact, it was an A+. "May I see it?" Mrs. Ebel hung it on the wall next to all my other A tests. Mrs. Ebel just called, said his mother. His heart fluttered. Why didn't you tell me that tomorrow was parent conference day? Asked his mother. Didn't I tell you? He asked innocently. No, I don't think so. I told you, he said. You said you couldn't go. You must have forgot. Mrs. Ebel seems to think it's important for me to be there, said his mother. That's just her job, said Bradley. The more mother she sees, the more money she makes. Well, I made an appointment for her for 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. Bradley stared at her in disbelief. No, you can't go, he shouted, stamping his foot. It's not fair. Bradley, what? It's not fair! It's not fair! He ran into his bedroom and slammed the door behind him. A moment later, his mother knocked on the door. What is it? She asked. What's not fair? It's not fair, he yelled. You promised. What did I promise, Bradley? What did I promise? He didn't answer. He couldn't until he thought up why it wasn't fair and what she had promised him. He stayed in his room until Claudia told him that he had to come to dinner. He followed her out to the dining room where his mother and father were already sitting down. Did you wash your hands? Asked their father. Yes, Bradley and Claudia both lied. Bradley's father worked for the police department. He had been shot in the leg 4 years ago while chasing a robber. Now he needed a cane to walk, so he worked behind a desk. He didn't like that kind of work and often came home grumpy and short-tempered. The police had never caught the man who had shot him. I hate fish, Bradley said as he sat down. So do I, said Claudia. It sticks in my braces and I taste it for weeks. Brussels sprouts make me throw up, said Bradley. They smell like old garbage, said Claudia. That's enough, said their father. You'll both eat what's on your plates. Bradley held his nose with one hand while he picked up a Brussels sprout with the other and put a hole into his mouth. What's all this nonsense about your mother breaking her promise? Asked his father. Bradley was ready. She promised she'd take me to the zoo tomorrow, and now she won't. What? Exclaimed his mother. I never said I'd take you to the zoo. She did too, said Bradley. Since there's no school tomorrow, she said she'd take me to the zoo. I didn't even know there was no school tomorrow until his teacher called me this afternoon, his mother protested. You promised, said Bradley. Okay, said his father. Janet, what time is your appointment tomorrow with Bradley's teacher? 11 o'clock. Okay, you can go to your appointment and still have time to take Bradley to the zoo after lunch. But I never said I'd take him to the zoo. You did, accused Bradley. And we have to go in the morning. We have to be at the zoo at 11 o'clock. Claudia snickered. Why do you have to be at the zoo at 11 o'clock? He glared at her, and then he turned back to his father. Because that's when they feed the lions. Claudia laughed. She promised she'd take me to see them feed the lions at 11 o'clock, Bradley insisted. His mother was flabbergasted. I don't even know when they feed the lions. 11 o'clock, said Bradley. Don't lie to your mother, said his father. Really, said Bradley, they feed the lions at 11 o'clock. I don't tolerate lying, said his father. I'm not lying, said Bradley. Call the zoo if you don't believe me. Don't lie to your mother and don't lie to me. Call the zoo. Your mother said she never promised to take you to the zoo. She's lying. Right after he said it, he knew that was a mistake. His father turned purple with rage. Don't ever call your mother a liar. Now you go to your room. Just call the zoo, Bradley pleaded. Maybe I did tell him I'd take him to the zoo, said his mother. See, said Bradley. Keep it up, Bradley, said his father. Just keep it up. You want to be a criminal when you grow up? You want to spend your life in jail? I see people just like you every day at the police station. Just keep it up. Bradley stared angrily at his father. Not all criminals go to jail, he answered. What about the man who shot you? I said go to your room. Bradley stood up from the table. I don't want to eat this junk anyway. He stomped down the hall into his room and slammed the door. Then he opened it and shouted, Call the zoo! One last time, and then he slammed it again. He laid on his bed, and he cried. Don't cry, Bradley, said Ronnie. Everything will be all right. You'll think of something, Bradley, said Bartholomew. You always do. You're the smartest kid in the whole world. Chapter 4. Bradley stood at the front door and hollered, Mrs. Ebel is a liar! Don't believe anything she tells you! Bradley's mother got into the car, gritted her teeth, and drove to school. She was just as afraid as Bradley, if not more so, of what Mrs. Ebo would tell her. She wanted to believe Bradley when he told her he was getting all A's or was elected class president. She tried to fool herself that it could be true, even though she knew it couldn't. She knew her son. And she knew Mrs. Ebo wouldn't take the trouble to call her on the phone if everything really were as wonderful as Bradley said it was. Still, she hoped. She opened the door to Bradley's classroom. No one was there. "Hello?" she called out timidly. She looked around. There was a bulletin board covered with A papers. She looked from one paper to another and hoped with all her heart that she'd see one with Bradley's name on it. She didn't. In the back corner of the room, she saw a chart that listed the name of every student in the class. Next to each name was a row of gold stars. Next to Bradley Chalkers, there were no stars. "Mrs. Chalkers?" Startled, she turned around to see Mrs. Ebo. "Oh, you scared me," she said, and then she smiled. Mrs. Ebo didn't smile. Mrs. Chalkers sat at a chair next to the teacher's desk and bravely listened as Mrs. Ebo told her about Bradley. There was nothing Mrs. Ebo said that she didn't already know. Still, it hurt to hear it. "Deep down, he really is a good boy," she tried to tell Bradley's teacher. "I'm sure he has a lot of good qualities," said Mrs. Ebo. "However, I have 28 other children in my class, and I can't spend all my time trying to help Bradley. He has to decide whether he wants to be a part of the class or not, and if he doesn't want to be part of the class, then he shouldn't be here. He just makes it that much harder for everyone else." "What can I do?" asked Bradley's mother. "The school has just hired a counselor," said Mrs. Ebo. "I'd like your permission for Bradley to begin seeing her once a week." "Anything that will help my son," said Mrs. Chalkers. "I don't know if she can help him or not," said Mrs. Ebo. "Bradley has a very serious behavior problem. If he doesn't show some improvement soon, more drastic measures will have to be taken." "Deep down, he really is a good boy," said Bradley's mother. "Well, let's go meet the counselor," said Mrs. Ebo. She led Bradley's mother down the halls to the counselor's office. The door was open, but no one was there. Bradley's mother stepped into the room. Boxes were everywhere. Some were turned over with their contents half spilled onto the floor. A yellow ladder lay on its side. In the center of the room was a round table surrounded by chairs, but the table and chairs were covered with papers and boxes and games and books. There was hardly room for Bradley's mother and teacher to stand. "She's just moving in," Mrs. Ebo explained. "I'm sure she'll have it all cleaned up by tomorrow." Mrs. Chalkers shrugged. She picked up a dolphin puppet from an open box on the table and put her hand inside it. Suddenly, there was a loud grunt, and a young woman entered the room. She dropped the box she was carrying, and more than 100 crayons spilled across the floor. "Oh, hello," she said. She was a lot younger than either Mrs. Ebo or Mrs. Chalkers. She wore blue jeans and a red t-shirt with rock and roll written across it in light blue letters. She had light brown hair, almost blonde, and clear blue eyes. "I'm Carla Davis," she said, and she held out her hand. Bradley's mother stared at her a moment, and then reached out to shake her hand, but then realized that she was still wearing the dolphin puppet. She quickly removed it and put it back on the table. The counselor smiled. "She needs to sign the form so that you can start seeing her son," said Mrs. Ebo. Miss Davis looked hopelessly around her office. "They're around here somewhere," she muttered, and then she began tearing into the boxes. "Perhaps I'd better come back," said Bradley's mother. "Found them," said the counselor, holding up the forms. She cleared a space on the round table by pushing away a box and gave Mrs. Chalkers a form to sign. Bradley's mother looked around the messy office, then at the young woman with the rock and roll t-shirt. She shrugged her shoulders and signed her name. Miss Davis took the form from her. "Oh, you're Bradley Chalkers' mother!" Mrs. Chalkers nodded. "You would not believe all the horror stories I've heard about Bradley Chalkers," said the new counselor. "I've been here less than 3 hours, but it seems like every teacher in the school has dropped by to warn me about him." "Deep down, he really is," Bradley's mother started to say. "I can't wait to meet him," the counselor interrupted. "He sounds charming, just delightful." That's where we're going to stop today. Tell me what you think about Miss Davis and about Mrs. Ebo and Miss Chalkers. Tell me what you think about Bradley and about Jeff. And leave that in the comments and we can talk about it next time. Have a great night, everybody.